You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Syracuse's offense was obviously really good yesterday. They put up 38 points on Ohio. They had almost 500 yards of total offense. I believe the exact number was 480. So it was a great start to the offense, and 8 different receivers caught a pass from Kyle McCord. So there was a lot of wealth that was spread, and that is a good sign. But one player who wasn't really involved in the offense much was Dan Villari, which is kind of curious. Dan Villari last season had 300 rushing yards, 180 receiving yards, and 6 total touchdowns. Dan Villari is a Swiss Army knife, if you recall. He is essentially the Taysom Hill of college football. But yesterday, he only played 25 snaps for Syracuse and did not record a single catch. He did not record a single rushing attempt. I don't even recall him even getting the ball thrown to him. I don't know if he had a target, but you can fact check me on that. Now, obviously, he wasn't a big part of the game plan against Ohio. It wasn't like Syracuse was trying to get the ball to Dan Villari and he just wasn't coming up with it. No, he really didn't get many opportunity. I don't think he got a single opportunity, like I just said. Now, I do want to give Dan Villari credit on this regard. Just because he didn't get a lot of opportunities doesn't mean that he didn't help the team win. If you recall, he had an excellent block on that 4th and goal play to Trebor Pena, which led directly to the touchdown. So shout out to Dan Villari for, yes, it's got to be a little bit frustrating to not get the ball, right? You're a tight end. You want the ball a little bit, especially with his usage at the end of last season when Garrett Schrader was hurt. But he still persevered and helped the team win with an excellent block for the Trebor Pena touchdown. Go watch that highlight again. Dan Villari had an excellent block right there. And obviously, Syracuse's offense still functioned plenty okay with Dan Villari not getting the ball at all. But at the same time, I would like to see Dan Villari more involved in the offense next week against Georgia Tech. Again, he is a Swiss Army knife. He was ACC running back of the week last year against Pitt. That's right. A tight end won running back of the week. And I understand his usage didn't really come until Garrett Schrader got hurt and was dealing with an injury while playing. But still, even with a guy like Kyle McCord, who can certainly air it out and is definitely the best quarterback that Syracuse has had in quite a long time. We saw it after just 1 week, and Ohio State fans with Will Howard, I don't know. I think they're trying to talk themselves into Will Howard being better, but I'm not so sure. He didn't look great against Akron. But anyways, Dan Villari needs to get more involved, even with Kyle McCord. And it's not on Dan Villari, it's on Jeff Nixon and the offense using him more. And the reason why I want him used more is because he adds a different dimension to the team, right? Imagine Kyle McCord in the shotgun with Dan Villari to one of his sides, either his left side or his right side, it doesn't matter. A defense has to respect the trickery. We didn't see any trickery really against Ohio. Did you recall any trick plays against Ohio? Now, maybe it's one of those things where Syracuse doesn't want to show their hand on offense. They're playing an inferior competition. They got Georgia Tech coming next week, and then they got Stanford, who, yeah, they should beat Stanford, but that's still a conference game. Maybe they don't want to tip their hand. But Dan Villari is the perfect player to use for that trick play element. Remember, he was a 4-star quarterback recruit at Michigan before transferring to Syracuse a couple of years ago. He's not a great throw. He's not a Division I thrower of the football. But if you're asking yourselves, who is a guy who can throw the ball on offense that isn't a quarterback? It is Dan Villari, because he is a former quarterback. He has that ability. He can throw it. He can run it. He can obviously catch it as a tight end. So I would like to see Syracuse use him more next week against Georgia Tech, because I think a trick play or two could really help this team. I think while the offense was really good, I'm not going to complain about nearly 500 yards. I did find it to be a little bit simplistic. And now sometimes simple can be good. There is that saying, it's KISS. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Right? There is that saying out there. But Dan Villari is the guy to use, especially for trick plays, because he can do so much with the ball. If you snap it to him, he could throw it. He can run it. I don't know what he's going to do if he gets the ball in his hands. Now, I did see something on Twitter, and it was a really good point about with Oronde Gadsden back and obviously Trebor Pena's emergence, and we're going to talk about Trebor Pena on a mini podcast tomorrow, that they kind of take away from Dan Villari as a tight end because Gadsden occupies the middle of the field. Pena occupies the middle of the field. You don't need Dan Villari anymore running routes in the middle of the field, but you can use him next to Kyle McCord. You can use him in a wildcat setting because he does have the ability to throw the ball at least at a respectable level, right? Remember this might be a little bit old. This is a long time ago. It was the 2009 or maybe 2008 Dolphins. The 2008 Dolphins with Ricky Williams and Ronnie Brown and the Wildcat. I'm not saying that Syracuse should run a Wildcat offense with Dan Villari, but what they should do is take a little bit of that element and apply to what they have right now. And one thing that offense didn't have, that Miami offense in 2008, Ricky Williams isn't a thrower of the football. Ronnie Brown is not a thrower of the football. Dan Villari can throw it a little. So I want to see Syracuse use Dan Villari a little bit more. And by a little bit, I mean actually get him the ball next week against Georgia Tech. Obviously, once again, Syracuse's offense was terrific yesterday. Kyle McCord spread the ball to 8 different receivers. Okay, it wasn't him just locking into Oronde Gadsden for 15 catches and nobody else did anything. It wasn't even just LaQuinn Allen who was running the ball. You see, Willis got some touches. Will Nixon got some touches out of the backfield. Dan Villari, though, is someone that I think this team should use going forward. I'm just nitpicking here. The offense was great, but I think we can all agree that we want to see Dan Villari more against Georgia Tech.